regular meeting of the North Coast Rail Authority.
That was a two-person coffee break. It was one an abstention and one here.
I guess that's worth 5 minutes of our time. The meeting is called to order. Heather, will you call the roll, please?
Director Kelly?
Here.
Director Woolley?
Here.
Director Olivier?
Here.
Director McDonald?
Here.
Director Colfax?
Here.
Director Myers?
Here.
Director Diedrich? Director Simonson? Chairman Hemphill?
Here. Thank you. We'll now call for the agenda approval. There's a document in front of us with some suggested changes. Oh, that's to the minutes. I'm sorry, I stand corrected.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the agenda. We have a second. Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The agenda stands approved. This is the point of the agenda where we welcome public comment. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes on items at this point that are not on the agenda. If it's for something that's on the agenda, we'll give you an opportunity to speak to that subject at that time. We've got a busy agenda today, so we ask that you be respectful of the fact that we want to let everybody speak. So can we have a show of hands of how many people expect to speak during the public comment session? And we should be able to handle that fine. So please go ahead.
Hi there, board members. I'm Marcus Brown with the Timber Heritage Association, and let me pass these along to you.
Marcus, one stapled copy, right?
Yes.
That's not great.
What I'm passing around here is John Woolley and I are both on the Humboldt Bay Trail Committee, or Trail Team, which is trying to figure out how to create a trail between Arcata and Eureka. And I might add, my mission is to figure out how to do it with rail and trail. And probably the most difficult section is along the former Arcata Redwood, basically from Indianola Road to Airport Road, where it's very, very narrow with wetlands on either side of the railroad grade. And this document is an attempt on my part to interview a lot of agency people, and after hearing all the different constraints and issues, I've suggested that there definitely is a way to have the rail and trail both. And one way is the very wide shoulder on the east side of 101 along that section. So instead of looking at the lumber mill, if you're on a trail, you could be looking at the Fieldbrook Valley, which I think is much more scenic. At any rate, I believe. Well, first of all, I believe, and there's actually the first statement, one of the first pages of the study that this group had done by a consultant says that most people support both the excursion train and the trail. So this community has broad support for having both. And I want to say that there are people suggesting that what we really need to do is tear up the tracks and rail bank it, put in the trail, and then someday if you want to put the tracks back, oh yeah, that can be done. In this community, I've lived here the majority of my life. To try and take on a fight of tearing up an established trail and put the tracks back, I, for one, would not want to pick up that. So my own feeling is, we got to find a way to make everything coexist. I believe in win-win. I believe in the mission of the NCRA to repair the tracks here and get something going. So I commend you for this. All of us have been around here watching this for a long, long time, and I just want to say once again that we support your efforts to keep things going. Thank you. By the way, if anybody else wants a copy of this, I'd be glad to have it.
Thank you.
Chairman Hemphill, board.
I don't think that mic's on. I'm not sure.
Yeah. It might be also controlled up here. Are we taping this portion?
Yeah. Sorry.
It's very clever, so if we don't like what we're hearing, we just don't have a mic.
Marcus was rather interactive here.
I think he's going to do something. Here comes help.
It's not turned on.
Anybody got a battery?
Put new batteries in it.
If you could speak up, you could go ahead and start it.
Don't mind, yeah. Chairman.
Can you hear in the back? Or?
Chairman Halpel, members of the board, my name is Mike Bittner. I live here in Eureka. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak before you and appreciate the fact you hold one of your meetings here. It's great. As I've mentioned in the past, it's great for you if you can find a way to be more forthcoming in what the plans are. And to that end, even just being able to view the business plan for the NWP NCRA would be nice, and it's not available, as I can tell, on your website, and if you had a pointer to where that document might live, it would be great for it to be available for public view. There are a lot of folks here beyond what Marcus mentioned for the excursion train. Also believe there will be a way to travel by train to San Francisco and move on to or commute between cities up here. Is that part of the business plan? No one even knows because we haven't had access to the business plan. So if there's some way to make that document available to the rest of the public, that would be awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Mitch, do you want to speak to that? I mean, we have specific plans for what we're doing in the south end, and we have a general mission statement for the entire railroad, but I don't think we have a business plan for up here because there is no current activity going on other than just maintaining what we have.
We have a business plan that the operator submitted to the California Transportation Commission that's focused on the south end primarily. And we have a management plan that accompanies that business plan for the Russian River Division. We do not have a business plan per se for the portion of the railroad north of Willits.
And I think just to supplement that, to clear the air a little bit, the reason we don't have a business plan up here right now is because we don't really have any funding available that would allow us to even guess when we could get anything done, nor do we have the environmental issues that need to be addressed to find out if it's feasible to reopen the canyon, and if so, what the mitigation measures might be. So we don't even have the money right now to do the preliminary work that would lead to a plan. That may not sound good in a business sense, but in the world of government, believe me, if you don't have the funds, you don't have the plan. So our responsibility is to maintain the entire corridor. That's spoken to in our mission statement, and that is available for anybody. But beyond that, the mechanics of how we do it is being done to look at what we can do, which right now is in the south end, and preserve the options to plan for other things on the rest of the railroad at a later date once we understand better what the obstacles are.
Good morning, gentlemen, and I'm glad you're here. You don't get here very often, but we're happy to have you. I just want to take this opportunity to Kay Strickland, Chair of Citizen Support Development, and I want you to know there has been no change in our position. We've been here for a long time and will continue to be here. And our position is trails are fine, but they must be safe, they must be with the rail, along with the trail, if that's where it's located. The trail must be safe, multimodal, and located with ample space between. And if it's on the bay side, we have doubts as to whether a trail and the rail could be safely situated. But many of us have come to believe that the best location for the trail is on the east side of Highway 101. And Marcus has given you a diagram that his idea of how that could happen. When Kim from Caltrans came to our meeting a couple months ago, we talked about that possibility, and even she seemed to be positive to give more thought to the east side of the highway. I kind of scratched these out at the very last minute this morning when I had to get up really early to take my grandson down to leave for the King Range to put in trails with the CCC. So when I came home, I had some time. Anyway, we believe that the rail must have the same funding access for operation and maintenance as other modes of transportation. We've always believed that. The League of Women Voters, in their position that they sent you early this year, talk about balanced transportation. That includes rails, roads, air, and water. And we also believe that while we do definitely support a trail, I think there's ways to improve public transportation for road traffic. And that's coming on now, just starting again with HCOG to be starting on their 2010 Regional Transportation Plan. And that's something we will be around, I definitely will be getting to later on that issue. But the main thing that I want to make very clear to everybody that's here, that our position is for trails are fine, but they must be safe. And I think that should do it.
Thank you, Kate.
You said it was going to be warmer today. I'm not sure that's the case here. My name is Pete Oringer, and my first statement is kind of preaching to most of the choir up here, is that a healthy transportation system that is also environmentally friendly and supports jobs and commerce and perhaps the social needs of our area, such as public transportation and the anti-sprawl concepts that are advocated locally and in many of the cities down south too. They're a very important vision. And I'd like to point out that the city councils of all the major cities in Humboldt County have supported the return of rail to Humboldt County, and that includes Fortuna and Arcata and Eureka. And the county Board of Supervisors has, in the past, sanctioned the return of rail to Humboldt County and endorsed that concept. That said, the many businesses that are up here are reliant on a healthy transportation system. And before you, in the past, have come businesses from our local breweries, the dairy farmers, and the dairy here, who a big transporter of goods all around the world for that matter, our flake board plant, our wholesale plumbing supplies, and the timber companies. All these people have come before you in the past saying that rail is necessary for them to remain competitive. And it's even more so with the transportation challenges of fuel and traffic that we are involved with now. So these businesses, these that are both in commerce and industry, have been before you to state that, and their views have not changed in communications to the local groups here. So I want you to know there's a broad feeling that return of rail service is part of a balanced transportation system, and that it is supported locally. There is the vision that rails and trails can be an important part of that system too, and virtually everyone supports rails and trails, not rails or trails. So I encourage you to continue what you're doing, and I must say that I'm a bit chagrined from what I read in the press that some representatives on the board don't understand your agency's mandate of return of rail to the whole 12 miles of the right-of-way that you're charged with. And that's what your agency is charged with, and we encourage you to do that and not get diverted by these lawsuits which you're mandated to be involved with now. And I'm sorry to hear that, because your focus is return of rail. And you're in the process of upgrading the southern portion of the rail, which we hope will be functional, and you'll prove the functionality of that, and it'll be a template for the northern section, which you have gone on record to say that's an important part of your agency's long-term vision, and I would encourage that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry. My name is Jerry Tomzak. I'm a citizen of Eureka, and I'm also a supporter of both rail and trail. However, there is a little difference in what our priorities should be, as I see it, because we are into an economic crisis in this state. And there is no denying it. The state legislature is scrambling and looking for ways of raising our taxes. And I've been in business myself, and when business was bad, I didn't have the luxury of increasing my prices. But unfortunately, the government can raise taxes, which is a negative effect on our economy. But be that as it may, I'd like to talk about a couple other things. In today's one of today's newspapers, there was an article that said 72 teachers from the Eureka City Schools would receive layoff notices. If you take an average of their salaries, that would equate to $3,140,000 worth of dollar spending in this area that would be lost. And I'd like to just say that the restoration of the railroad is an economic survival issue. The establishment of trails is a quality of life issue. Both are important, but the priority must be with survival. In order for us to survive, we need jobs, viable jobs in industry. And I love trails. In fact, I hike them. I backpack. And there's a book here I have. It's called The Hiker's Hip Pocket Guide to the Humboldt Coast. There are 56 trails in Humboldt Coast area, varying from 1 to 25 miles. There's plenty of places to walk, but there aren't plenty of jobs. So my contention is that we need to have the rail as a priority, and that should be our priority. An establishment of rail up here is vital for the survival of the North Coast, particularly this area, because if we don't have adequate transportation, this place will be a cut-off island. And we're already struggling with things like the Richardson Grove improvements, where truckers can bring bigger trucks to transport goods to Humboldt County. And we need rails. And rails, by the way, is a green issue. There is nothing that moves goods more efficiently and with less cost than steel on rails. So, gentlemen, I urge you to continue your efforts to put the railroad through to Humboldt County.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Scott Greason, Executive Director of the Environmental Protection Information Center. I want to express my gratitude to Directors McDonald and Myers for joining this body and attempting to bring some measure of accountability to this effort to, as you put it, restore the train through the Eel River Canyon. We've joined the City of Nevada's lawsuit challenging the reckless and ill-considered efforts of the North Coast Rail Authority, because we agree with the City of Novato that the attempt to restore the rail line using a series of piecemeal approaches is an attempt to segment the environmental analysis into small pieces. That's impermissible under both CEQA and NEPA. It's also incredibly bad public policy. The fundamental issue here, at the core, is whether it's viable to bring a railroad back through the Eel River Canyon. We assert, as protectors of this region's environment, that it is not only impossible fiscally, but environmentally irresponsible. Until we've seen the comprehensive environmental analysis, which you have promised to put out and refused to put out, we're going to continue to take that position. In the meantime, the effort to bring back a failed, and disastrous railroad is frustrating the attempts of citizens here on the north end to use the public property that ought to be available for trails. Now, there need not be a conflict between rails and trails on the north end. There's abundant evidence that those areas can be used for trails, and if a rail becomes viable in the future, they could be restored to use in the rails. The opposition between the rails and trails is, I think, a result of rail advocates' efforts to make it one or the other. It need not be one or the other. But I want to be very clear that if there is a conflict, we think trails are a much superior use of that public property, given the impossibility of your addressing the fundamental problems this rail line has. So thank you for your efforts. The defensiveness you've encountered, I think, is the predictable result of an agency that is fundamentally up against geography and climate and hasn't realized it yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
Hi, my name is Jay Wasaki. I'm a student at Humboldt. And as far as the railroad between Eureka and the rest of the southern portion, I really don't know much about that issue, and I would support that. I'd support being able to take a train from Eureka to San Francisco. That'd be great. My concern is that between Arcata and Eureka, I ride my bike on the 101, and sometimes, the wind can push you towards the cars. That's my main concern. I support a trail and a rail between Arcata and Eureka. I would love to take a train. I would love to ride a bike. I'd even walk it. And it's not really an issue to me of which is better, which is superior. I just want to see an alternative to driving or being forced to take the 101 on my bike. So whatever you guys can do, I support in that direction. And I see a lot of other issues that are at stake, but in the meantime, there's a stretch that's being not used, and I think that it's a waste, really, because driving Eureka shouldn't be the only option when there's another alternative. So thank you for your time, and hope you guys come to consensus.
Thank you.
Yes. Sid Bird. I'm a president of the Humboldt Del Norte County Building and Construction Trades Council and a business representative for Plumbers and Steamfitters Local 290. I'd like to thank the board for having their meeting up here in Eureka. It really makes the residents of the North Coast feel connected to the whole process, and we deserve to be connected with the Bay Area and the rest of the world. That's why this railroad is so vital to our community. You have a lot of support out there that's silent because people have to work and try to make a living and pay for their mortgages and pay for the high price of gasoline just to get to and from work. That's why this railroad is so critical to this area. We're geographically challenged. We can't get product in and out to build a good manufacturing base here without an inexpensive or an alternative route of hauling material in and out. We keep hearing about all the challenges in the Eel River Canyon. This is the 21st century. We're all environmentalists in this room. I don't think anybody here wants to see the environment degraded, but there's engineers out there that can do it, and they can do it safely. If they can't do it there, they can move it up the hill or something. But for Pete's sake, they built this thing back in the 1914, I believe, and it was operating up until 1999. You know, we can spend $3 trillion in Iraq. We can spend billions of dollars foreign aid all across the country. Why can't we get our U.S. senators to get off their butts and get some funding in here to connect us back to the rest of the United States and help us have an economy here in Humboldt County? And thanks once again. I realize that you guys are not the North Coast Trail Authority. You're the North Coast Railroad Authority, and you have a job to do to try to get us connected back to the rest of the world. We appreciate your efforts. Anything we can do to help you, please let us know. We'll try to get the rest of the representatives in this community to back you in your efforts. Thank you for coming. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
We keep talking about trails, yet nobody has ever identified where the maintenance money.
Can you identify yourself?
My name's Lawrence LaBranche. Where this money's going to come from? Yet the economy is tanking, and yet we're supposed to have this unfunded mandate of these trails. Trails are great. We got lots of them. Parks, all this kind of thing. We need rail. Gas is increasing ever more. Trucks are not going to cut it. Let's be clear about Epic. If they could, there would be zero gravel mining, zero logging. Our only industry would be eco.
No, wait a minute. This is not a dialogue. Everybody gets to speak. You got to speak. Please go ahead.
I didn't say anything false about him.
Please.
There'd be nothing but ecotourism. There's nothing. So if they have their way, to be the existing gravel and rock mine on Island Mountain wouldn't come to pass. Yet it's been existing for over 90 years. And there's nothing wrong with continuing on. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else that would like to speak?
I know the problems. First of all, my name is Richard Tolson.
Thank you.
From Eureka. I lived in the Red Scotia area most of my life before I moved up to the northern end of the county. But what I'd like to say is I know we need to connect from the canyon on south, but I feel from where we can go from where the tunnels stop from up from Marshland and Miranda along the 101 corridor up to Arcata is where we should really focus right now, and then get good engineers to figure out how to get from the restway down to connect us with the rest of California and the rest of the United States, but concentrate from where our at the north end of the canyon, north to Arcata, and then worry about connecting after we get all the engineering done for tunnels and other things down south to Willits. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to that point, I don't know whether you recall the activity between the Harbor District and the railroad. We did take an attempt to get some Proposition 1B funding to open up the Humboldt Bay short line, as we referred to it, because our operator indicated that there'd be a modest amount of business here, and it would be an important step and an article of faith on our part that we're doing everything we can to get funding. Unfortunately, that money sagged to Southern California. I think it built a couple freeway on-ramps or something that we didn't get the support that we really needed, and the deck was stacked against us anyway. But that's a problem we have with the whole North Coast. We get the short end of the stick on transportation funding, not just railroad funding, but and, you know, in spite of our inability to do anything on the whole railroad, I think the last gentleman's point was well taken. That we're still looking at opportunities up here because the challenges, both environmentally and economically, are less daunting than the rest of it. So, good point.
My name is Al McKinney, Humboldt Bay advocate. One thing that's kind of makes me feel bad about this railroad board is I've lost the faith in the board, because I have not seen this board in all these years take some kind of action to fund or get the funds from the government to build a railroad out of Humboldt County. To go back down the old Eel River Canyon is not even financially feasible, probably never will be. And the public don't believe it either. You go out on the street and ask about it, and they just change their whole mind about the idea of a railroad coming back to Humboldt County. A lot of people don't want to talk about it because they feel that there's never going to be one here until we have a national railroad system that will tie up Humboldt County with the main line. And that's probably going to be over in Red Bluff. And I don't see right now where this board has taken any action to secure the funds to rebuild the rail into Humboldt County. And from the other point of that, to bring the rail back to Humboldt County, we have to go out there to the Harbor District and look what they've done. They're sitting there now with 2 pilots, 3 consultants, and another company trying to tell them how to build a dock. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, taxpayers' money, just going down the drain and nothing's happening. And the other factor is that when LNG was here and trying to get its foot in the door, the Army Corps of Engineers and many of the scientists around here declared you couldn't bring these 1,000-foot ships in here. You couldn't even dig out the harbor into a ditch, which has tried to be done many times, and it has failed every bit of the way. To ditch out Humboldt Bay to be an international port harbor for containerization is probably never going to work, because the estimate for rebuilding the jetties, they're too narrow to bring that type of shipping in, was $8 billion. And nobody wants to listen to those type of funds. So I'm asking this board, if you're going to harp about railroad, or do something about it, be constructive and start the dialogue with the government or the funding of the money, develop a plan that the public will buy, and then you'll get some support. Until then, you might as well rail bank the whole place until that happens, and that's probably going to be about 20 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barbara Groom, the owner of the Lost Coast Brewery, and I'm one of the local businesses that would enjoy having a railroad here. We have a truck a day of bottles coming in, 3 to 4 trucks a week of grain coming in. A couple of years ago, we tried shipping beer to Florida on the rail. We had to load it on a truck and take it down to the Bay Area, and then put it on a train, and it didn't work out so well. Also, locally, we'd love to be able to have a tourist train. I own a restaurant, and it would be great to have a tourist train here and have something to keep people in the area for a little longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. there anyone else that would like to make public comment? If there's anybody else, if you kind of move up to the podium so we can keep moving here, then we'll know how many people we have left here.
Good morning. My name's Greg Gardner. I'm a Eureka resident involved in the visitor industry. I have a visitor magazine here. I would agree that we are all, at our very nature in this community, if we live here, concerned about the environment. I certainly would agree that that is an important statement. I would also point out, though, that today the world that we live in is so much different. There's a saying that comes to mind, so old it's new. I can only imagine what it must have been like back in 1910, 1913, when they were starting the task to build this railroad and what they were faced with, the economic challenges of moving freight from one point to another point, how to do it economically. Well, you know, crude oil, I think today almost hit $130 a barrel. And the way we move things today and the way we're going to move things in the next 10 or 20 years is going to change dramatically because of the cost of fuel. And there isn't a less expensive way to move things than by rail. And so as we look at becoming a viable part and having an economic community that is growing and is vibrant, I think one of the things that we have to figure into that is a viable railroad. I know that you took a step at getting funding, and I know that it must have been very disappointing, and I know it's also disappointing to the highway department when they lose funds as well down south. I just ask you to, again, redouble your efforts as we move forward in this very, very important thing. The second part of my point is, as it relates to the visitor industry, what a beautiful jewel this would be to have a railroad that had passenger service, where people could have the experience of seeing what, in my opinion, is one of the most beautiful places in America. To be able to sit in a car and look out at that landscape, at those mountainscapes, at those unbelievable redwood trees. What a wonderful thing that would do for our community in terms of bringing people here. If we look back even up until the 60s, we had, you know, all through the Eel River, millions of people that visited that area. And it's gradually coming back, but it's still not there. But with the railroad, my goodness, what a wonderful story that would be. Anyway, thank you very much for your efforts. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for listening to my testimony.
Looks like that concludes the public comment period. Thank you all for your comments. It's an important part of our process. We're accountable to the public, and the best way we hear it sometimes is directly from each of you. So we may not all agree, but we certainly have our obligation to listen. At this point, we'll move to presentations. We have John Murray give us a presentation on the Arcata and Mad River Railroad Trail.
Thank you. My name is John Murray. I guess I have membership status in the Friends of the Annie and Mary, I can say that. This presentation is supposed to be a follow-up of a letter that you received from the city of Blue Lake that wasn't in the agenda package. I think that was given to you this morning. The Annie and Mary, which is also known as the Arcata Mad River Railroad, is from post mile 295.57 north toward Blue Lake, roughly from the northern city limits of Arcata at West End Road to Blue Lake. Did you have a... No, or just... Okay. And the 295.57 is important. That is the northern limit of your master agreement with NWP. It is off of your agreement. It's not under control of them. It's entirely within your domain. In addition to that, there are no rails in this section. It's 7.5 miles. There are no ties. Everything was torn up in the 90s. So there is nothing there right now. So that is the section that I'm talking about. So we're talking rail not there, so we're talking trails only. Now, I have to tell you two things, and they're both because they have a bearing on this. One, I'm ex-county administrative officer. I used to sit there where Mr. Myers does. And I tell you that because I am not going to lead any governmental entity down some path that is going to come back and bite you later and cause some problem. I'm not going to do that. I'll put all the facts out there. I'll tell you good news and bad news, but I'm not here to pull the wool over anybody's eyes and do anything. The other thing is I used to be the Public Works Director and worked with Public Works for 24 years. I used to sit here where Mr. Stogner is. And we put projects together. Two of the big things on the projects are, have you got money? Have you got a place to do whatever it is you're going to do? In highways, we always had to do a right-of-way certification. We were dealing through Caltrans, FEMA, Federal Highway Administration, who knows what. You had to certify the right-of-way. And that's the main thrust of my comments to you today. Now, 10 years ago, I went to a meeting in Blue Lake. This was about the trail out there. And I told them at that point, you know, you're not going to go anywhere until you know who owns it and do you have the right to build on it. And in the 10 years, we're still to the same point. So I got a little solicitation for funds in November. I told them I wouldn't give you any money, but I'd come out here and help with any expertise I had. So I started looking at the right-of-way. Deeds for that right-of-way go back to 1888 or something like that. And they say for a railroad, you bought the right-of-way, what have you, a little strange to me. So I went and talked to my retired staff that dealt with that type of stuff. What is this? They said the railroad has an easement. Then even talked to an attorney, and it's a gray area. We don't know who has what from that. It has to go to court to be perfected. So, wandered up to the assessor's office. The route through there, your railroad, used to be Simpson's Railroad and Eureka Southern. It has its own separate AP numbers, assessor parcel numbers. You don't give a separate assessor's parcel number for an easement. So I'm thinking, okay, the railroad, when it was Simpson, a private industry, they paid taxes. So there's a real good chance that by adverse possession, they gained possession of that strip. And went a little further, went back to the treasurer's office. Can I see the tax bills for back in the early 1980s? And well, that's going to cost you some money because it's past the date that we keep them current. Go talk to the assessor. Maybe they'll share a file with you and you can see what's going on. Back up there, and finally somebody came out of the back room and said, oh, that strip, that's the railroad. Yes, there's an AP number, but nobody pays taxes on a railroad, even if it's privately owned. They pay a fee to the California PUC. So I really got into a gray area, but I'm walking the right-of-way, and I see a new property pipe. And it still has the lap next to it, and it says Witness Corner. Now, I'm also a surveyor. Also have the admiral for the fleet, because the county does have some boats. But anyway, so Witness Corner. You put a Witness Corner in when you can't put the pipe where you really want to put it. So I happen to know the property owner, and I said, Dennis, can I see your title report? Can I see your subdivision map? Subdivision map shows his line in the middle of what would be the railroad tracks if they were still there. Title report says he owns to the center of the railroad tracks. So any hope that the railroad had something more than an easement all of a sudden went out the window. Now, and this is going to tie in with your G1 item a little bit, and also with rails and trails on the same right-of-way. It's my position, unless there's something else legally that I don't know about, because I don't deal with railroads a lot, you do not have the right to enter into an agreement with the city of Blue Lake to say, put a trail on our right-of-way, because you have a right-of-way for a railroad. You don't have a right-of-way for a trail. You don't have a right-of-way for a gas main, sewer line. Your right-of-way is for trail or for railroad purposes only. So this is where rail banking was waved in front of me. And people had talked about rail banking before, but I didn't really understand it. Rail banking is where you abandoned the railroad, and at the same time that you abandon it, you rail bank it. Now, what this was done for was Congress did not want to see the railroad right-of-ways being abandoned. I mean, where can you get this long strip of land for how many miles in some cases, and if you lose it? And that is a major loss, because as times change, maybe the railroad wants to come back, as people want to put in underground gas lines or whatever, there it is, telecommunication lines, it's there. So when Congress enacted the rail banking law, it bypasses all of this, who owns the land, is the easement that the railroad has for railroad purposes only. It says you can use it for these other purposes. And it has been challenged in courts, and the nice part is, it's a law that Congress passed. Congress and the U.S. defended, and they, the federal government, which is still our money but from a different pocket, they pay any adverse takings suit. So it's something, if you rail bank, you're not losing anything, because it also gives the railroad, even though you went through an abandonment process, the right to come back in the future. So if you abandon it without rail banking, you can't come back. If you abandon it and rail bank, you can come back. Now, I think he bills himself as the other candidate from Supervisorial District 2, in that election. He's saying, well, we need a railroad, but they're going the wrong direction. They've got to go to Red Bluff, so here's a track that you can come back on. So, anyway, we, the Friends, and hopefully Blue Lake, I cannot speak for Blue Lake, what we need is something from the Railroad Authority that says, once you get all your questions answered, if you don't have enough, that we would certainly entertain rail banking, because we have to be able to certify our right-of-way so that we can do trail projects. Thing was brought up, where's the money coming from, things are tight. I don't know where these bike people get their money, and when I used to be doing roads, it used to irritate me that they would have the money for that, and I couldn't have enough money to patch potholes. But they keep coming up with money. And the county just recently signed on to be a lead agency for an anticipated $50 million grant that would come to Humboldt County for trail purposes. And if that money doesn't come through, there is other money. Now there's one other thing with rail banking. It requires a manager. The manager acts as the holding company on the railroad. If you rail bank, you turn the right of way over to a manager. That manager can be a city, county, I think it's even a non-profit, it's listed in the law. Initially, the request is, we would like you to be the manager until the county can get its everything together. Supervisor Woolley is trying to get a county group, maybe a joint powers authority or something else that would be that manager. If the railroad authority became the manager, you would not be assuming any additional responsibilities that you do not already have. You do not have to build the trail. What you do is you are liable for the right-of-way and what is out there, which you are now. But if you do not want to be the manager, then somewhere along the line, if we could get some assurances that when the county or some other group would step forward to be the manager, at that time you would abandon it and rail bank it. And it has to be done at the same time. You abandon it, you can't rail bank it. I think there's a 10-day window. You don't start rail banking within that 10 days. So that is what we're looking at. Now, I do have one additional handout. I always like to make things a little bit easier. These are a couple for staff, the lead staff. You just hand them down. One shorter. No. These are different considerations of your responsibilities or things that would happen. One, if you take no action. Two, if you just abandon it. And three, if you abandon it with rail banking. And you will notice under liability, cost to repair and remove the structures, the ability to return to rail, the need for you to put in more funds, whether you can put a trail there, and community goodwill, the only one that is all green, which is good, is abandonment with rail banking. And the only other green spot on there is the ability to return to rail if you do nothing. So, I'm retired, and don't put it off if you get a chance. John knows that.
You're my mentor.
Anyway, I have time to work on things. I know your staff is swamped with stuff. If you have questions, I can start digging. One question already came up, Surface Transportation Board, has this already been abandoned? Surface Transportation says no. It has not. So, you know, the ability to rail bank is still there. So, that's what I have. We've more or less asked other people with the trails, we're going to let it go with this and not swamp you with people. And I used to tell new supervisors, there's more to be a supervisor than counting hands in the audience. So, you know, I can't tell people not to talk, but that's where we are. If you have any questions?
I think we probably will. And before the public starts, I want to thank you. That probably is the most focused presentation we've seen on this subject. It's come before us many times, and there's never been anything negative up here. We just haven't been able to get our arms around all the different pieces of it. This really does well. So I'd like to open it up by discussion. John?
Yeah, John, thanks. And also, I see Dan Hauser has stood up just while you're speaking. Maybe since with his history, we could add him in right now to round out what you've said, because I know I've talked to him to complete more of a record of the
That sounds fine.
Is that okay?
Dan, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Dan Hauser, resident of Arcata. A couple of things I just wanted to elaborate on Mr. Murray's presentation. First of all, I strongly support the trail and the rail banking of the Arcata Mad River Railroad. I think that clearly under your legislative mandate, this is a different game than the rest of the railroad. The rest of the railroad, I don't believe you have the authority to rail bank or abandon. The rail line to the Arcata Mad River Railroad was purchased differently. It was purchased by the agency, not as part of the original mandated legislation, and was purchased directly from Simpson Timber Company, not part of the bankruptcy of the NWP. So therefore, you have a lot more flexibility on what you can do with that portion. The line was unused because of the trestles, Warren Creek trestles, and insufficient freight to keep it open. In addition to that, the North Coast Railroad Authority has already made a commitment to the supporters of the trail. Back in 1997, this board, with different membership, voted to support trail usage of that portion of the line. So this would be a follow-up. And as I understand the legalities that Mr. Murray has pointed out, there's a significant advantage to the NCRA in going through this process, rather than just abandoning, but abandonment with rail banking would be a financial advantage to not only the community, but would be an advantage to the NCRA as well. So I would urge you to move forward with working with the Friends of the Arcata Mad River Trail to work out an abandonment with rail banking program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. At this point, and prior to public comment and questions, we'll open it up to the board for some discussion. It's not an action item, but I think we could give staff some direction based on the consensus developed. So, John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank John Murray for doing a stellar work and pulling together bunches of pieces of information that has been floating all around this issue for some time and bringing us a concise kind of direction. I did speak to Nancy Bider at STB this morning, and she said if you own the land outright, then you can do whatever you want. And again, the problem we have is we may not own the land, and that is where that procedure, rail banking, then clarifies it, I guess, so we can move forward. So you said one thing though that caught my attention, because we had already given some direction to the city of Blue Lake that we thought we